Hi everybody. There is a very legitimate question that many people ask, mainly atheists, and that is, if God exists, why didn't he prove himself? Why there isn't a clear scientific proof about him? Mainly this question is asked to believers. Why we, the believers, can't prove God's existence by science? And by science here I mean the experimental one, the concrete way of proof. Well, we can't, not because there is no proof, but because science is disabled in this issue, and I will explain that. To prove that something exists, we find a unique attribute about that thing, then we test it. Again, it should be a unique attribute. For example, we cannot say just because water is a fluid, then it's water, because fluid is an umbrella to millions of things. So again, to prove that God exists, we have to find a unique attribute about him. The only attribute that I thought of is that God is random. Random here does not mean chaotic. It just simply means he is not affected by any force or field or whatever, or he is not even pre-programmed. Usually people call things random when they are unable to calculate the outcome or the events that is going on with that thing or issue. But just because they don't know what it is, then they call it random. Again, random here I mean the scientific term by random, which means it's not affected by anything. And God, since he is the top of the hierarchy, then everything below him is controlled by him or in some way affected by him, but he is not affected or controlled by anything. This is the only attribute that I think that God has and nothing else has. Let's assume that God accepted to get into the lab, so we test this attribute on him. Well, to test this attribute, we have to know all the fields, all the forces in science, and then we test that all these fields or forces does not affect his decisions. Then if these fields or forces do not affect his decisions, or also we prove that he is not pre-programmed, then we can prove he is a God. But there is a problem here, which is how can we know that we know all the science to say we tested all those fields or forces? We know that there is no limit. So far we don't know there is a limit for science. And even if God came and told us, okay, humans, you know all the science, well, we cannot take his word. Scientifically, we cannot take his word because he is not proven to be God yet, so we can take his word. Okay, so since we can never know that we know all the science, then we can never prove God's existence by experimental science, because in this case science is unknown for its limit. I remember that Dr. Dawkins and Dr. Strauss keeps talking about the experimental science as if it is everything and it can prove everything and it's the only right way to prove everything. No, I don't think so, because the experimental science is disabled in this issue. However, we could use other kinds of sciences. For example, the French scientist René Descartes, or Descartes, I don't know how do you spell his name, René Descartes, he tried to prove God, which I think is a very good way, because he assumes that everything does not exist. He even tried to prove his existence, his self-existence, and we know that I think here I am. This is his famous statement. Again, Dr. Dawkins and Dr. Krauss don't talk too much about experimental science. It's disabled, especially in the big issues. Thank you very much.